what I'd like to do now is to ask you just a little bit about this question of the people who came before us. And I can't help but reflect on the one conversation I ever had with Clarence Thomas, where I got to ask him, "You really don't believe in affirmative action? Really?" And in this 4 minutes I had with him, I then asked him, "Well, how'd you get your first job?" Right? And so I was interested, Lateefah, and your Taco Bell story is a great one. I'll never forget it. But I would like to ask you, I think one thing that I've seen in effective leaders is a strong support network, not in their job necessarily, because there is a unique solitude to leadership, and I think it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. But there are people who came before you who made you possible. They're your ancestors for sure. But there's also folks who right now in your leadership role support you, and places you may go with vulnerability or questions. And I'm curious, it's a quest I'm on in my own space. Where do you find now, so not history, not childhood, but now, who helps you, who supports you, and where do you get, where is there an ear that you could ask questions you can't ask elsewhere? And so we'll start with you, Lateefah.
I ask everybody for help all the time. And it's a very unique question for me because, 2.5 years ago, my husband was diagnosed, many of you all know, with a horrific form of leukemia. And Monday was the first anniversary of his death. But during the 2 years of his illness, we did a couple of things. We began chronicling, because we were both activists, so there's too many people to call to give updates, so we started chronicling every single thing, almost ridiculously, that was happening with his illness and our journey, and we traveled to get care, different parts of the country, and it was very difficult. It was a very, very rare disease, and through that, we realized we actually needed a lot of help. And we had both given so much consistently, because that's what we were put here to do, that we realized we didn't have savings. We had paid a ton of people's PG&E bills and rent over the years. We both worked with young people. Like, wow, we have nothing but this community, which became everything. And so folks asked us to even be more vulnerable and to ask for what we needed. And it was a real lesson for me, not only personally, but professionally, that it is... in our sector, we are supposed to know how to do stuff. You're just supposed to know how to go to your desk and get it done. And if you don't, you check in with somebody in your next cubicle. But sometimes I realize that's not enough. It actually takes thousands of people, thousands of ideas to make anything go. There are no new ideas. There are only good leaders who have strong teams and who push the limits, right? And I have not one mentor, I have about 500, literally. I mean, somebody keeps a good calendar, I need to know how to do that. Someone really understands finance, you taught me how to do that. I am completely and 100% vulnerable to what I don't know, and also pretty badass confident about what I do know. So, right? And so what I think is helpful in that, especially when we're talking about running institutions, I was talking to you earlier, I've been an executive director of 15 years of my 20-year career, which sounds weird when you're trying to fight for justice. Like, I say that, I'm like, oh, that's weird. But in this 20 years of working and being paid to fight for freedom and equity for the people that I love, having to run institutions in the nonprofit and philanthropic industrial complex that exists, it's deep to be vulnerable. But I find that it is so much self-serving, because it also proves to the people that are working with you or you are working for that your seat is actually interchangeable, and that you could bounce at any time, and that institution, if you've done your job, that seat can be filled because you don't know everything. So yeah, I'm kind of an open book. In a way that sometimes might not be healthy, but it has worked for me.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the video of the guy dancing in the field, and people go to join him, yeah. And I don't know who's the narrator, but it says, leadership is overrated. It's the first follower that really matters. And it's deeply moving, Lateefah, that your support network is the people you serve, and that was beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Jose, I mean, and I personally can name lots of individuals, so I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Well, I mean, I've throughout my life, I mean, I've had a lot of people believe in me, even before I believed in myself. The people that, said, oh, you need to go to UC Davis. I was like, oh, what is that? Or the people that, said something about Princeton. I was like, oh, what is that? But somebody definitely, showed me the way to kind of get in there. And so I've always been very thankful and I think vulnerable and open for help. Because I knew that I didn't know anything, nor that I had the people to help me through that. So in every stage of my development, there's always somebody there, there's a group of people there. But I always kind of go back to the ideas, like, even with my own, family story life, it was because, we didn't see ourselves as just, this individual person. It's like, oh, I'm going to get out of poverty. It's like, that never happens. It's a group of people coming together, helping each other, and making life better as a whole, as a team, as a unit. And so we did that, in my family, and I think we've done it in community as well. And so, and I think, that's really important to remember and talk about more because, we have in society, we have like this notion of this cult of the self, saying like, oh, I'm going to move that mountain all by myself, and that is my plan, and I'm going to do it in 3 days, and here's my schedule how we're going to do that, and I'm going to task, it's just weird to me. It's always been sort of counter to everything that I know, because it's like, no one person can move that mountain. It takes, a team, it takes a people, it takes an organization, and nobody can survive by themselves either. But yet our society believes that that's the case, and I think that's really bad because they use that notion to actually blame people that they deem poor. It's like, well, you're poor because of you. It's your fault. You're the one to blame. It's not us. And then they sort of turn the table around us. And I've always rejected that storyline. I've always rejected. It's like, I didn't choose to, my family situation. I was born into it, and then you have to sort of, do the best you can to make your life better at that. But the typical narrative in society, blames us for everything. So I think we have to sort of reject that. So the people that I associate myself with are people that they can understand that, they're part of that, so that way we can, one, prove that wrong, and I think that's how, those are the people that I call part of my community, in a sense.
And the humility that you are both expressing and that vulnerability, that seems to be the only rational response, I think, to the power dynamic that is leadership. Because it's real, it exists, and it's not a reflection of value, but people see it that way. And so I think one of the challenges of leadership is to reject it, is to say no, equal value, equal wisdom and intelligence. And the leaders that I respect have all come to that consciousness. And even in my own experience, it hasn't always come to me, it's often come to me in retrospect. Because it's hard. You get invited into this cult of one, of the individual. So thank you. Cynthia.
For me, it's I was very idealistic and wanted to go back to my country and help rebuild Vietnam. So my career path followed that. It was I didn't have any analyst background, but the senior management of a hedge fund that wanted to start a Vietnam fund brought me on board because I wanted to start a Vietnam fund and open the first American school in Vietnam. And then it was a Vietnamese engineer in San Francisco who moved me from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco and gave me the opportunity to join his firm because he wanted to rebuild the roads in Vietnam. And I knew nothing about the engineering industry, but he took a chance on me and moved me here. And I ended up spending 9 years in the engineering industry, and then there were always people who took the chance, and they liked they loved the passion I had to help my country rebuild, and that helped me go along the career path that I did. So it's those people who take a chance on you, but also it's for me, it's like getting involved in the community builds your network, builds your advisors, your mentors, and the more you get involved within your school and your community and the nonprofit organizations and professional organizations, the more people you have around you. So I think you can find a lot of those gems, those people that believe in you within all of those networks.
And so, Cynthia, we talked a little bit before about how relationship is so essential in your work. Can you talk about how you are doing what we just talked about with others? Like, when you meet someone in your field, potentially younger or working in or around your organization, what moves you when you, in an individual? Like, how do you identify and support the wisdom and intelligence of people around you?
So I'm in the staffing business, recruiting business. So to me, it's everyone is a good candidate. It doesn't matter who you are. Everybody has potential to have a good job and build their careers. And I always make the time to meet with everybody, give everybody a chance, connect somebody to somebody I know, help them connect to my network, because it's also my way of paying it forward, because maybe 1 out of 10 people I help would become my client one day. So that's always been my philosophy, because my family and I have been giving every chance possible to be where we are, and I think everybody should have that opportunity.
I always try to look for people that also have that sort of fire inside of their gut. There's the sense or the desire to actually, change the world like tomorrow. And those are the people that I gravitate towards, actually. People that have this, this drive that they want to do something. And I try to find them, and then, to build relationships with them, build, a sense of camaraderie with them. And when I'm fortunate enough to, for them to join MAV, it's even better, because we're like in a team together trying to, demonstrate something. But I actually do look for that, because I know for a fact not everybody has that fire. Not everybody has that sort of flame inside of their gut, wanting to change the world, because it's hard. It's really, really hard to do that. And there's a lot of people that are complacent. I know that word was used today. And there's a lot of people that are fine with the situation for what it is, or they're fine with those statistics, because they might be actually in the business of keeping those statistics for what there is. There's a lot of other stuff going on with some people. So I try to identify and kind of build a sense of understanding with other people, and then sometimes I might not even work with them. Sometimes I just know that they're there. Like I know Orson right there. As long as I can kind of keep an eye on him, it's like I know we're doing the same stuff, and I know that, and so we can kind of work together. And because what we're doing is difficult, we're trying to demonstrate that there's a different way, there's a different path forward, that we can actually work with people, from a strength-based perspective, and then reject the deficit-based perspective, reject that notion. And so working, with like-minded people is really critical, just to validate, it's like we're not crazy, we're not alone. There are other people, other crazy people like us that are trying to do the same thing. So it's something as a self-care in a sense, right? But I love that. And then you asked a question about who gave us your first job, or how the people go before us, and to some extent it's not just the person that gave you the first job, but it's really this tradition that we have about in the social justice movement, that the people that we're following are the Mahatma Gandhis, the MLKs, all those people that have really gone out and fought society to make it better for everybody. We're following them, and we're like maybe like the 500 person to kind of get into that dance, if you will. But and I'm glad that we're doing that, because we have to kind of do that. But there's a long history, long tradition of social justice work that we're kind of continuing that path, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to sort of teach that to our kids, so that they can be the the next generation that kind of fights this battle, because it's an ongoing sort of battle that we need to fight. So I recognize that, and I recognize that I have the privilege to be doing that right now in my professional realm, but it's about finding or identifying the other people in our realm that are also doing likewise.
So how do you know it when you see it?
That's a great question. I've sort of, in my life of traveling and exploring, I've sort of divided the world in people that are explorers, and people that are settlers. And the people that are exploring, they're out there. We're exploring. We actually do know each other. We can see each other. It's in the handshake. It's in the, like, tell me your story. Tell me, how did you survive? How did you get here? And it's in the sharing of the moment where we actually, I see a kinship in our exploration of the world, and not just by distance traveling, but trying to again push against a conventional wisdom. I don't know if this is one thing specifically, but I've always found that my deepest friendships are those other people that are also explorers, trying to find themselves in the world.
Right. Inquisitors and question askers and seekers, and in some level there's a magic to it. It's like pornography, you'd know it when you see it. Yeah.
I wouldn't know about that.
Lateefah.
One of my best mentors years ago asked me 2 questions. And those 2 questions, every time I'm given the honor and opportunity to work with folks who are steering ships of either institutions or initiatives, I ask the same question, like, who are you and what are you? Like, if I ask those questions, I'm not talking about ethnicity, I'm not talking about your gender, but who are you and what are you? And those questions are large ones. But those 2 questions help me to frame how I'm going to live my life. And when we think about supporting folks who've taken the opportunity and the privilege to lead, they have to figure that stuff out. They got to do some work. So I love working with folks, especially young leaders who are doing their own work first. You absolutely cannot lead a glorious movement if you're rotten inside.
That's right.
If your stuff is just, Mutu, who actually, he works for you, I believe.
I work for him, by the way. Yeah.
Works with you, is one of my mentors as well. And he once said, if you don't do your work on yourself, you'll open that lid. It'll be like opening the lid to a garbage can that has not been dumped in years. And people will see it and smell it. And we see that in leadership all over the place where folks haven't done their work. But to answer your question, I've actually had the opportunity over the last few months to go throughout California and find leaders from Indian country to Oxnard to, South Los Angeles. And one of the things that I'm learning about leaders, whether it's like the gang leader or the young person who is developing a new initiative that's going to disarm the sheriffs in LA jails, these visions that folks have for change are big. Yeah. And they're fluent in their analysis of how they're going to get there. What I am sad about in this idea around leadership and how we cultivate it is our industries are squashing visionaries. Mm-hmm. We have created an industry where young people and also, sort of even venerable leaders, they think now so much in strategy and goals and objectives that they have forgotten how to dream, right? They have forgotten what it means to think about breaking down a system completely. And instead, they're really worried about the teeny cement linings and the small bricks. How do we create spaces for leaders to dream again? The dreams like desegregating schools, right? The dreams of marriage equality, the dreams of completely eradicating poverty. And of course, we must be strategic in that leadership, but while I'm inspired by the leaders that I'm meeting and loving and learning from, we have to create more spaces for the radical leader, for the radical dreamer. And we can find those examples like the dreamers, like young people who are laying their lives on the line for their freedom and have nothing to lose, like the young people who are throughout this country in the streets demanding something so different for freedom. And that's actually where we're going to find it, in the deepest, under the grass, right? In the dirt, not even the grassroots.
Because there's, I think, a good connection here to the next question I want to ask. There's something, when you read the article, A Bolder Form of Leadership, one of the essential pieces of it is a deep and abiding respect for the wisdom of the folks we're serving. There's a restraint in that that's really beautiful. And I wanted to ask you while you were talking, well, how do we do that? How are we going to create those spaces for people to dream outside the box of this false consciousness that we all got to be businessmen? Right?
You need both of you. Again, you need the fluency in how to run a shop, but you also need to be given the space to have grace while doing it. And the only way that we're able to sustain ourselves is if we remember our vision, right? Because this work isn't easy, and every day, for folks who have to humble themselves and ask for resources for work they know is good and consistent. Like, we have made fundraisers out of visionaries, right? Right? That's what we do. We raise money. We raise money 80% of the times and 20% of the time doing what we were called to do. I think that why I love LeaderSpring's so much is because it is one of those spaces. I've had a few spaces in my life where I was just given an opportunity to think, to sit out. Like, how do good leaders exist if they're never given an opportunity to sit and read some shit, right? right? And love and play. One of the things I want to do this year is I want to take like 20 young leaders to Cavallo Point and say, kick it. Just no facilitation, just 4 days with your family. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but now that I am in philanthropy, which again is a sector that can be transformed, I think it is so important for us to demand that those spaces exist, and for those of us. Not all activists and organizers should go into philanthropy because there won't be nothing left, but it's a great sector. But what we can do is step up in the same ways that we stepped up in the streets and in the fields and transform the way that we do business. And I think it is incumbent upon us to create and demand those spaces in my sector so that folks, you should not have to fundraise 80% of the time.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. And I get it. But I think that we have to trust leaders. We have to trust leaders. If Fannie Lou Hamer came knocking at your door right now, if Ella Baker came knocking at your door right now, if young Martin at 32 came knocking at your door right now, would you ask for his theory of change? Or would you say, you know what, I believe you. So no, I can't fund the other 9, but I believe you. You have something so deep and visceral that you are going to change the world. I think that's what we have to do, and you provide space. Harry Belafonte paid Martin's bills. We know that. Ford Foundation dropped dimes on SNCC, right? So that they could be who they needed to be in that time. I think that that's what we have to do again.